Hi, Dr. Sowa. Welcome.
Hello.
I am Rachel, Community Manager here at Alloy Women's Health. We are a digital health platform bringing science-backed, evidence-based menopause hormonal solutions direct to your door. Today, I am so happy to welcome Dr. Alexandra Sowa to the Alloy platform. Dr. Sowa is a dual board certified physician in internal and obesity medicine, author of the Ozempic Revolution. I have my copy at hand, and founder of So Well, where she combines both clinical and holistic care to patients. Deeply proud of her Johns Hopkins and NYU education, she now serves as clinical instructor at NYU School of Medicine. Her expertise has been featured in media outlets such as the New York Times, CNN, and Women's Health. She's also a clinical instructor at NYU School of Medicine and a nationally recognized voice on metabolic health. As a reminder, please feel free to drop your questions for Dr. Sowa into the Q&A. I will get to them later on in the call, and take advantage of today's code SOWA20 on the Alloy Women's Health platform. Welcome again, Dr. Sowa. It's an absolute pleasure to meet with you. I always get nervous ahead of these calls, but today I'm especially nervous because I'm
Oh, don't be at all. Oh my goodness.
I'm just thrilled to speak with you. Okay, lay the groundwork for us,
Yes.
if you would, and help us to understand how metabolism in particular really changes in perimenopause and menopause, and why it feels like, and so many of us do experience, that our bodies are suddenly not working or working against us.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we age with each decade of life, and specifically in midlife and the peri and menopause range, our metabolism, it doesn't actually slow. So
Okay.
it doesn't actually, which is so surprising.
Yeah.
But I am not here to gaslight you and tell you that weight gain does not come on.
Okay.
What happens actually is our body's needs change. And so the big thing that happens is when muscle mass decreases with every decade. And muscle is very metabolically active. And so that's why it's so important. And we hear so much the importance of strength training for both bone health, but it's also for metabolism health and for keeping up good body composition. The other things that really start to happen, it's not necessarily metabolism, but it's all of our hormones start to go very wonky. And the big hormone that I talk about a lot is insulin resistance and leptin resistance. So these are hormones that help control the hunger and fat metabolism and fat storage. And we start to develop a real resistance to the signal that the body receives with these hormones. And as this resistance, this hormonal resistance gets worse and worse, and it's affected by changes in estrogen and progesterone too, it becomes really easy to gain weight and really hard to lose weight. So there is a confluence of muscle goes down, hormones resistance starts to happen to our hunger and fat storage hormones, estrogen dips, our sleep starts to become crazy. Just the way that our body interacts with the world is disrupted, and that leads to some significant weight gain.
Great. Thank you so much for all of that and for the clarifications. One thing I really love about your book, Dr. Sowa, is it starts right away with this kind of a clarity. And I would suggest even a kind of pushback against maybe what people have embedded in their minds about midlife and weight gain in general, that
Mhm.
somehow also GLP-1 medication is strictly for the morbidly obese, or it's somehow cheating. And you speak about patients that you have treated in
Mhm.
your practice
Mhm.
who cover a wide range. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Okay, so let's break this down. So, yes, I start with the biology of weight gain because I want people to know that this is not a willpower issue. For so long, we've been sold a bill of goods that if we just try harder, eat less, work out more, if we just white knuckle it, that we can achieve the end goal. And that if you can't do that, and if you carry excess weight or put on weight, that you are somehow a failure. And that's just not how science and biology works. I'm in this whole field because I come from a family of specifically women who really carry significant excess weight. And I saw from such a young age that my grandmothers cared so much. They tried so hard and they did everything that their doctors told them to do, that society told them to do. They went to Weight Watchers, they counted steps, they did all of the things, every diet that under the sun, and the weight just kept coming on. And they felt such guilt for not being able to figure it out. And my one grandmother was a college professor. I mean, she did hard things. She went back to college and graduated alongside my father and then went on to become a college professor. And
Oh,
she couldn't figure it out, right? And she figured that out. So
yeah,
it's like
yeah,
we
yeah,
know this isn't intelligence or strength or willpower. It's a combination of genetics and environmental factors that come in. And so I think it's really important that people understand the why of what's happening, and then you can figure out the how to treat it. And GLP-1 medications are that solution that so many people have been looking for. And for so long, people say, oh, that's just cheating. It's the easy way out. You just don't want to put in the work. Well, I think anybody who has wants to lose weight has put in so much hard work. Like it is such an insult to say to them, just try harder. Like they've tried.
yeah.
And GLP-1 medications level the playing field in terms of helping of solving the biology factor and potentially the genetic factor too, and allow us to do the things we need to do to improve our health. And so on the front of saying that GLP-1 medications are not just for people who have morbid obesity, and we can talk about what that means. We actually don't even use that term anymore. We
Okay.
classes of obesity, but just significantly overweight is what people think of when it comes to medication or even surgery, which is not the case. But it also is the case that skinnier does not mean healthier. And so we shouldn't just all go on these medications in an attempt to fit back into our skinny jeans. I mean, and I hope we'll dig into that today. I know we have time to do it. So when it comes to who benefits from this, I mean, technically, the FDA has said that it's people with a BMI over 27 with a comorbidity, so some health-related issue that will be improved by weight loss, or just a flat BMI greater than 30, which puts you into the obesity category. Now, BMI of 27 is not that overweight,
Right.
really. So physically look at someone and I get a lot of comments like you would never guess by looking at me. Like
Yeah.
people will say that, but like then I step on the scale, right? And what we're actually, I think, moving toward as the abundance of evidence comes forward that shows so many health improvements by early interventions with GLP-1 medications, improved cardiovascular outcomes. We can practically stop 100% of the time the progression of prediabetes to type 2 diabetes now with these medications. We have kidney protection, brain protection. The list really goes on and on. I think we're going to start to move away even from BMI and start to look at body composition as a better tell of who might benefit from these medications and how to guide them to be the healthiest. Because if you're starting off the body composition that isn't ideal, the goal isn't just to lose weight, it's actually
Right.
to improve that body composition and lose weight. And so it's going to help guide our conversation on
Right.
even a more personal level.
Thank you so much for that. I want to get into now what these medications actually do in the body, but just very quickly, you remind me over and over again about the, sort of the involvement of the conversation around GLP-1 medications, sort of running parallel to the involvement of the conversation around estrogen, progesterone, and
Mhm.
I think even more now testosterone. So
Right.
it's not lost on me that there's a coupling there, and there's also sort of like a chef's kiss coupling around these two sort of approaches to women's health. Talk us through what these medications do once
Mhm.
in the body.
So, so okay, I'm going to teach everyone. I think I'm going to explain
Do
something right now. It's going to blow everyone's mind. So
it.
we make GLP-1 natively. So we have native GLP-1. And because of that, we have GLP-1 receptors all over our body. And that's what makes this drug so, so, so powerful. And it's something that was not even fully understood as we started using these medications. We were just using them to treat blood sugar. Okay. But then we start to see these downstream effects that don't just seem to be from weight loss or blood sugar, but it actually has to do with the effect of this medication on the receptors. We have them in their eye, in our heart, in our kidneys, in our muscles, I mean, just everywhere in our brain. And so why this medication is so effective is because our native GLP-1 degrades pretty fast on the seconds to minutes. And the synthetic version of the hormone lasts a very, very long time, really up to weeks. And but it mimics what our body makes. And it's actually gotten better with every iteration. And even with the new drugs that are coming in the pipeline that mimic and talk to our receptors in a more effective manner, but last a long time. So that's to kind of get that out of the way. And it is a hormone and our body receives it, but it's just stronger. But the ways that it works in the biggest impact, I call them superpowers. There are three big superpowers of GLP-1. One, it talks to the brain and it says, don't be hungry, but also don't obsess over food all the time. And that's what people call food noise. I mean, that is not a clinical term, but it is a term coined by social media, but it describes it so effectively. It'll say, I
So
just have
appropriate, yeah.
stopped thinking about food. The second way it works is on our gut, and it slows GI emptying time and our whole transit of our GI tract. This makes us full for a long time, and it works directly on the hormones that are secreted by our gut and go to our brain. So when we started off talking, I said there are all these hormones that become resistant. What I kind of skipped over was that fat and obesity is really not a willpower issue. It's really a neurohormonal dysregulation. So all of the hormones in our body that talk to our brain and tell us to be hungry and not hungry and how to store fat, they just become dysregulated. And this hormone kind of resets that. And so food sits in the stomach longer, and then our hormones to the brain and to our gut and fat storage, they just quiet. And they say, okay, well, I'm not going to be hungry. And then the third way it works, so powerful. It's directly on the pancreas and on our relationship with blood sugar. And our blood sugar becomes very stable very fast. And the insulin that our pancreas secretes becomes incredibly effective and quick. So our pancreas makes insulin. Insulin is a hormone that gets labeled as the bad hormone, but we need it. We need it to grab up our glucose and deliver it to our body. When we say someone is developing insulin resistance, which is very, very common in the United States, and it really hits around age 40, what happens is your body says, I don't like the level of insulin that I'm seeing. So you go back and make more of it. I need higher and higher levels of insulin to receive the glucose. And during that time, blood sugar rises because it's just waiting, hanging out for a higher, the effective level of insulin to be delivered to it. So your pancreas is working, but you're making too much insulin, and that insulin isn't being received well. Well, GLP-1 medications quickly make the insulin that your body makes effective, you need less of it, and blood sugar is stable. And that is how we use it in type 2 diabetes. But for everybody else, it just decreases inflammation because any level of blood sugar that's higher than normal can create problems throughout the body and can lead to fat storage very, very quickly. Often when people say, I have not changed a single thing, I am working out so hard, I am dieting, and I keep gaining weight, I test their fasting insulin, and I see very significant insulin resistance that's not yet reflected on the average blood sugar marker. It kind of predates what we see as an evolution into pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes.
Yes, I was actually that patient. So I am using a GLP-1 through Alloy and was exactly that patient. Hadn't changed anything, was very embedded and well-versed in nutrition and fitness, and up and up and up and up, went 30 pounds. And at 55, couldn't take it off. Just, it was a stop. And so, so thank you for continuing to illustrate who all of these patients are. All right. You walked us through what the medications do. You walked us through sort of who's a good candidate. You talk in your book about a hyper responder. Is a hyper responder, and should it matter if you are one or not?
No. So we study these medications, GLP-1 medications, on population averages. And so we know that semaglutide, which is Ozempic or Wegovy for weight loss, we lose about an average of 15% of total body weight loss. That's on average. And with tirzepatide, which is a dual agonist, a dual hormone medication, GLP-1 and GIP, we see significantly more. So we see up to about 25% total body weight loss. But again, averages. Now, there are people that are on the ends of the bell curve. You lose less, you lose more. Now, something that's very interesting for your population is that women actually, for the first time ever in the history of weight loss, lose more on these medications than men do, if you can believe it.
Amazing. No, and I want you to unpack that more because it's fascinating.
Yes. And so women do tend to lose a little bit more. I have some theories around this where we don't quite know why yet. And people without progressed insulin resistance, especially into the type 2 diabetes range, lose more. So if you have already kind of progressed there, it might take you longer. And so there are people who lose more. In my practice, we combine, and I wrote about all of this in the book, I put it into the book. We're very particular about how we eat. And it's not a diet, but it's really like, how do you eat to thrive on these medications, not just to lose weight, but to really, improve muscle and keep up your protein intake and keep up your calorie needs, because we don't want to tank our basal metabolic rate on these medications. People who do that, who really couple it and really embrace the whole of the lifestyle, do tend to lose more too. So we call someone a hyper responder when they're just like, wow, I lost a lot more than what the averages were going to tell me.
Right.
But, I don't always love to lead with that, because people have unrealistic expectations about the amount of loss. And I go through this in the book. People think what they see on social media, where it's a clip that goes from 100 pounds overweight to 100 pounds lost in a second. They like, it probably took that person well over a year, as it should. And not everyone has 100 pounds to lose, so it's not going to look that dramatic. And that doesn't necessarily look like health for everybody. So being realistic in what it is, how fast we want to lose and how much we should lose and what our goals are, is really important.
Thank you, Dr. Sowa. And I am going to ask you about food and eating and what you suggest and recommend, which feel to me is kind of antithetical to what women tend to hear in midlife about how to eat. So I really want to get into that. If you could, walk us through a bit about why the coupling of MHT and a GLP-1 may be so positively impactful for women. And then I want to ask you about what might people expect when they start a GLP-1.
Yeah, so we have some early interesting studies, small cohort studies, very small, that show that women who are on hormone replacement therapy plus a GLP-1 have more weight loss, significantly more actually than just GLP-1 users alone. I will always caveat that by saying I have never found that someone who is not treated, or if you can't be treated on full dose or can't be on hormone replacement therapy for whatever reason, I still have great success on GLP-1 alone. So I think there's a lot of panic when that study came out, if people could not be on it. It's also not large population studies. So we need a lot more evidence about whether this becomes the standard norm. But why does it work better? Because people are feeling better. Like that, I really feel like if you ask my patients, they'll just say, well, I'm just not so consumed with my perimenopause symptoms right now, my menopause symptoms, and I can actually feel more like myself. So then I have some energy and thought and just ability to focus on the GLP-1 portion. But also, there's probably a big hormonal component that has to do with estrogen rebalancing in the right ratio of hormones that allows our body to, okay, allow it to lose weight without feeling like it's in kind of a fight or flight mode,
Right.
where you're just like, okay, this is normal and I can do this.
Right.
We're a little far away from saying this is
a must.
a must, exactly.
Yeah.
But it's definitely mutually beneficial.
Yeah. Thank you for that. And now I just want to say, before I ask you the next question, I see a lot of questions coming into the Q&A. I'm
Yeah.
about that. I'm going to get to them in a few more minutes. I just want to get through a few more for Dr. Sowa. So tell us, Dr. Sowa, what can someone realistically expect in the first several weeks of a GLP-1?
Oh, it's so different for everyone. And I'd actually like to say that so many of the questions that I'm even seeing coming in, people really think they should feel a certain way, think a certain way, they should achieve a certain weight loss, and every single person is different. So, if on your first week of medication you have no appetite, that's normal. If on your first week of medication, your first month of medication, you truly do not notice a dent in your food noise, that's normal too.
Okay.
So something I describe in the book, I'll call, I describe a typical patient journey. And what I found over treating thousands of people is that there is like everyone thinks they're so unique, but we're all very, very similar. And this idea that you're experiencing it wrong is often the fear from the beginning. So many people are like, I just knew I was going to be the one person who didn't
Yeah.
respond, right? And we really need to work through that. And that might hit you 5 months, 12 months in when you hit a plateau and you still have more weight to lose. Or 10, I call it the 10-pound panic. Generally, about 10 pounds down, especially women have said, I've been able to do that on my own. And I've been able to do that 20 times over the past,
Right.
20 years. I fear at this point that this will never work for me. This will not work. And people often want to throw in the towel at that point. So, whatever you're feeling is normal. What is not normal is when you feel very sick. So often, I think the headlines, coupled with people's experience when they're not getting a lot of guidance, coupled with this idea of no pain, no gain, makes people think that they should feel sick, and that's normal. It is not. So we talked about that second superpower of the gut being delayed, the gastric emptying, your whole gut being slowed. It leads to a lot of GI side effects. And so those side effects can be everything from constipation to nausea to diarrhea to reflux. And that those are expected. Those are expected on some level, but not to the level that you can't function, that you can't
Right.
eat, that you're very unwell. You need to talk to your doctor immediately if that's happening, because we need to remedy that. And importantly, you do not go up on the medication the second
Right.
month.
Right.
So a lot of people who are prescribing these medications think that they should just follow the set standard protocol up, 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 up. And you really need to go person to person. So in my practice, people are like, wait, you forgot to write refills. I'm like, no,
Right.
we have to go month by month. It's so much more work, but I want to know where you are. If you're losing a lot of weight or if you're feeling unwell, we have to stay at that initial dose because it doesn't benefit anyone to go up and push through. You'll just get worse side effects.
Right, right, right. Thank you for that. Someone wrote in my DMs, and you answered several of these. She said she was experiencing nausea, fatigue, weird appetite swings. You answered that. Someone also wrote to me, I noticed the day or two before my next jab, my hunger seems louder or I'm
Mhm.
more hungry. What's that
Yep.
about?
It's the medication wearing off. There's a reason we have a 7-day dosing schedule for this medication, even though I told you it lasts weeks in your system, and it does. The nadir of how strong this medication is that it falls off by day 5 or 6, and that's normal. So while this isn't the standard recommendation for the medication, I do ask patients to think about when they need the most help and time their medication to that. So for many people, it will be the weekends because there's not
Yeah,
as much structure. And so people will take the medication on a Thursday or a Friday because in the first 24 to 72 hours is when this medication seems to be the most effective. It also is the time that people feel the most side effects. So it might help someone to take it on a Friday. So Saturday, they're like, oh, I just don't feel like myself.
right.
I'm kind of like, I'd rather be at home than at work and having a million things to do. Um, so that's important to know. The other big thing that's really important to know, this is the thing I wish everyone would talk about, no one does, is that hunger is normal and
Mm.
hunger will come back on these medications.
Thank you
Okay.
for saying that. That is so important to know. You should not be absent of hunger.
No, at the beginning, it can be normal. Like I said, everyone experiences this differently. I really need people to still eat even when they don't have hunger. And
Right.
that's very counterintuitive to the way that we've all learned. And eventually, I want you to learn how to embrace your hunger. In the book, I actually have people track their hunger before they even start their
Yeah.
medication because it
Yeah.
can become so confusing. Like, I don't know. Was I
Yeah.
hungry before? What did hunger feel like? I really want people to tap into hunger and fullness. But between 5 and 12 months on any given dose, we know that studies show, large population studies show that people's hunger comes back, cravings for food comes back. They want sweeter things, they want saltier things, they crave things again. And people lose their minds when this
Yeah.
happens. They go back
And
to
flush
that.
that out for us because I was gonna ask
Yes.
that.
Well, they
Yeah.
go back to that sabotage mentality of like, I knew that this would never work for me. I knew it would come back. They panic. Sometimes people want to stop the medication because they've kind of talked themselves into thinking this won't work. But if you look at the studies, even when cravings come back and hunger comes back, your ability to make good choices, and I don't mean not eat anything, but just make good choices remains, and weight loss remains.
Yeah. Which is phenomenal.
Yes, yes. So, of
And
course, you
metabolic
can
changes
eat
remain, right? I mean, that's,
exactly
yeah,
all
metabolic
of the
health.
benefits that we see,
Okay.
right? So
Okay.
the metabolic, the lipid improvements, the glucose improvements, and all of these things that have become re-regulated allow your body to maintain its weight loss. So it's just really important that we recognize that hunger is normal, hunger is good, and when hunger happens in the future, you start to honor it. So then we have to move from a world in which you just have to eat because you need to eat to, okay, now I have hunger. How do I honor that hunger? How do I start to incorporate different foods in that kind of fill that hunger and naturally enhance my native GLP-1 too? So things like fiber, we go back to more of the voluminous way of eating rather than just the protein focused way of eating, things that will actually fill us up. And giving into a craving is not going to be the worst thing in the world. And we have to kind of reteach our brain that and get away from the diet culture mentality. And I always describe it to patients as a pendulum. Like we tend to think that weight loss, you have to be on one end. And if you're not in that one end of the pendulum, you should go back the other way. And I don't want people to live there. I want them to live right in the middle, the
Yeah,
lowest way.
for those of you who don't have Dr. Sowa's book, I highly encourage you to get it. It's really phenomenal and sort of helpful in pulling threads on what we understand and sort of where so many of us have lived since our childhood years in this place of diet
Mhm.
culture. And so swinging anywhere can feel threatening or triggery or all kinds of things for many reasons. And you really sort of help us live in the middle. I'm almost pivoting to questions that have come in, but I do want to talk lastly about food and just sort of expand on this a bit. You talk about uh, carb quality.
Mhm.
And so can you kind of help us make newer sense on a GLP-1, what we all sort of understand to be the protein, fat, fiber trifecta? Um,
Right.
as that being like the place to be. And you sort of put forth that not all fruits and veggies, like heavy dose, as we know,
I know.
is in our best interest. Let us know about
Right. Okay. So I have a slightly different way of viewing this. I actually never have patients count calories in my practice. I really don't believe in it. I feel like it doesn't get us very far. And if we can focus on the macronutrients and the quality of food, people are able to self-regulate and it's a lot more sustainable. And so I identify protein as the most important macronutrient, especially on our GLP-1 journey, because it's a thing your body really needs. And if you fill up on other foods, even including healthy foods like fruits and veggies first, you're going to run out of room for the
it.
proteins. And protein is very important for muscle building and keeping up enough calories so that our body doesn't go into a massive deficit and start to shut down. So our basal metabolic rate, it's important to keep that up. And protein, which generally comes with a little bit of fat, also that helps us. So we focus there first. Now, for my patients with a history of PCOS or insulin resistance, or if we've progressed as far as type 2 diabetes, or if someone is just a lifelong dieter, I will have them really start to look at carbohydrates. There's a lot of overlap between going a protein forward and first way of eating and a carbohydrate restricted way of eating. So there's a lot of overlap here. And I said the word restrictive, but I really don't want people to ever think that we're restricting. I'm just looking at the way that your body operates best. And when we have significant insulin resistance, cutting back on carbohydrates can really help us, and really paying attention to the quality of carbohydrates and how we pair them matters. So I talk about this in the book, but there is a great study out of Cornell that showed the way that we order our food
Yeah.
actually makes a difference in how our blood sugar responds. And lower blood sugar and more stable blood sugar means more weight loss. And so if we just take the traditional American meal and the only thing we do differently is actually move the bread to the end. I have to apologize, guys, if you can hear. I have a baby in the background crying. That baby
Oh,
is being
yeah.
taken care of, but I don't know what
Baby.
happened. You can hear
Oh,
them.
we
I'm
can't
I'm
hear. I
I'm
can't.
from my home office today. Okay.
Okay.
People are like, what are you
No, no, I couldn't hear baby. Okay.
doing? So the bread, if you move it to the end of the meal rather than the beginning, we can lower our post-meal blood sugar by about 30 points, which is remarkable. So
Amazing.
sometimes it's not even eliminating, but it's just reordering and kind of honoring what our body needs first to make sure that it's nourished, and then saving room for the others. And I'm not also opposed to carbohydrates. I want people to be able to live their lives and fit in what needs to fit in. But we do live in a world where carbohydrates and processed carbohydrates are in abundance. And they're the thing that our brain has wants and
Yeah,
craves. And it
a
gives
lot.
us a dopamine hit. And it
Right.
actually has damaged our brain. So we talk about leptin. I talked about leptin resistance. Well, ultra processed foods, carbohydrate heavy foods, salty, sweet, fatty, they damage our brain because we need more and more of those foods to get that same sort of hit. And so that's where we become resistant to them in our brain.
Right. Right.
And so reducing them, and for some people even eliminating carbohydrates can be effective. But really what I want people to do is protein first and make sure you're eating enough, because on these medications the problem actually becomes, I am so full. I had toast today. I don't
Yeah.
want to hear that.
Yes. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Sowa. All right. I'm going to turn to questions that came in.
Okay.
Someone asks about your recommendations for dosing.
Mhm.
Um, she talks about having a great response. Are there options available other than getting her coverage under insurance? But sort of the broader question that I had for
Mhm.
you as well was on dosing and
Mhm.
how you talked about not titrating up too
Mhm.
quickly, but when do you know this is good for me? I'm living here.
Right. So, okay, so that really has to do with expectation setting. So let's talk about that. So we talked about these averages that we see on population wholes, and for some people, they're going to be that average. And so sometimes if we are at the higher end of the spectrum and they're like, but I want to lose more weight, but you've already lost the 25%. Well, we have to talk about what's healthy. Have your metabolic markers improved? Is there
Mm,
anything else I need to optimize? One of the things that I think is so important as we start these medications, we talk a lot about numbers on the scale and even body composition, but we have to do a full workup. We need to
yeah,
know, is there sleep apnea that's being untreated? Is there fat in your liver? Is there insulin resistance? Do we have cardiovascular disease? And so that helps me from the beginning know, have we improved? Right. So I have a patient talk about in the book, and I just saw him recently. This is a man. Most people on these medication are women, the vast
yeah.
majority, about 60%. But this guy, he came to me after the pandemic and had gained a lot of weight, and he had fat in his liver, and he was young.
Mm,
And that's how he got to me. It was through the gastroenterologist, the liver doctor. And we started to lose weight, and he felt great. And he was like, I actually like being a little bigger. I like being strong in the gym. I don't want to lose more weight. But we looked at his markers still in his liver, and it still wasn't optimal. And
right.
so I had to have a gentle conversation with, you actually have not achieved the full weight loss that we need you to achieve. And he has since, and he's maintained for a long time. But that's really important to help set the standard of how much do you need to lose. So when it comes to semaglutide, people generally do tend to need to go up to the full doses. It's like we lose a little bit less on this medication, and the full standard dose is 2.4 milligrams of the medication. And when it comes to tirzepatide, there are three therapeutic doses, 5, 10, and 15, and there are little titrating doses in the in between. on the insurance level of things, it's very frustrating because insurance will often say you can't stay at the in-between doses. And I'm like, well, why?
Right.
People are losing at this, right?
Yeah.
So if you are a hyper responder, if you're someone who does respond at the lower doses, great, stay there. But if you're somebody who has more weight to lose, the percentage averages are in your favor of loss, and you've made the decision, with your prescriber to go up, and don't feel guilt about it. Often people will think, well, going up means that I'm not doing something right, or going up on the medication means that it's not working, or you should feel guilt because someone else can do it at a lower dose. Leave that behind. Every biology is different, and that's just it. This is we'll get closer, I think, as time wears on. We'll get closer to understanding your specific genetics and your specific needs and pairing you up with the medication that might have the greatest and best effect. So
Thank
we're
you.
just not quite there yet.
This next question sort of piggybacks off of that. This person says she's lost steadily for 18 months on compounded semaglutide, but have lost nothing for the last 3 months on the same regimen or more strict intake. She's wondering about changing to liraglutide. Is that ever something you would?
I definitely wouldn't do that.
Okay.
So liraglutide is a daily medication, and on the spectrum of GLP-1 medications, it's the least effective. Now, sometimes people respond differently. Their brains respond differently to the different
Right.
GLP-1s. So even if percentage-wise, someone might achieve more in a dual agonist or a different one, definitely wouldn't I don't think I would recommend stepping down there. And it
Okay.
can be a more expensive medication these days anyway.
Okay, thank you. I had a question about side effects. You talk about this in your book, risks around pancreatitis,
Mhm.
other things. Someone's asking here if you could talk about some of the side effects and what happens when you go off of these drugs.
Oh, yes. I see a lot of questions in the box about this.
Yeah.
Okay, so side effects. So when you lose weight, especially when you're a female and you're over the age of 40, you can create gallstones. And gallstones have nothing to do with these medications. They happen to come as you lose significant weight, which happens on these meds. And gallstones can become a little bit of a problem. So I like everyone to know what gallstone pain is. It's pain that's generally on the right side that happens after meals, and it goes from your front to your back. And so often you'll feel like a back pain.
Hmm.
And it just really, we call it colic, biliary colic, gallstone colic, meaning after a meal, you'll feel it and then it'll get better. And you're like, that was weird.
Yeah.
And then it comes back, and people often ignore it. And that's when it
Right.
becomes a problem because gallstones can get stuck in the biliary tree and can go up and create inflammation in the pancreas. And I have had that happen in one patient before. What is the solve? The solve is you have to have your gallbladder out. And that's happened in more than just one person in my practice. And then you can go back on these meds. Pancreatitis is not increased on these medications, but that gallstone formation is because you just lose a lot of weight. So you want to watch out for that. And if you have a history of pancreatitis in the past, sometimes it happens for unknown etiologies or very high triglycerides. You can work with your doctor to kind of decide where you are in that risk benefit ratio, because sometimes the weight loss will help the things that led to the initial onset of pancreatitis in the first place. A lot of the GI side effects are very manageable with the right regimen. I actually have created a whole line of products called So Well that's available in retailers all over that combines, like, I believe in a regimen of electrolytes, fiber, and of protein. And the fiber is very important to get both soluble and insoluble fiber, which is tough to do in volume when you're not eating a lot at the beginning. Um, and so psyllium husk can really
Yeah.
help us both constipation and diarrhea. Reflux is something that people deal with. You'd always need to let your provider know at the beginning if you experience it. I treat people for reflux with a medication, a proton pump inhibitor at the beginning, but it's also important to know that you really need to watch your volume. And even if you're
Yeah.
eating so much less than you did before, sometimes in each setting, it can just be too much because your stomach isn't digesting it, and it can lead to reflux symptoms. So those are really the big ones. Also, people, I feel like if you ever see these side effects, thankfully we're seeing, sorry, headlines. If you're ever seeing headlines about side effects that are GI, I think we're seeing less of them now, knock wood. But these cases must be in people who are just ignoring all the symptoms and like not talking to someone about it because they don't come out of the blue. So if you just all of a sudden your gut stopped moving and you were really constipated,
Mhm.
that doesn't happen overnight. And so if you're not going to the bathroom, let your doctor know. We can like there are medications even to help with constipation that are prescription strength and we can get ahead of it. And there are tests to know how like you just
There
don't
are things
hide the
that don't,
symptoms.
yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
don't hide what's going on. You should not be miserable on these meds. Okay, and then the other thing you asked about was h- staying on these meds and how long should you be on them? And I think this is really important. I see a lot of questions coming in about
Yeah,
this. So, generally speaking, these medications, once you start them, you will be on them for a very long time, potentially life. So, the way that I like to describe it is if you had an underactive thyroid and your body was no longer responding to the hormones that talk to the brain and the thyroid, you go on a medication that replaces that hormone. And once you go on it, you're generally on it for life. Now, you might have to make dose adjustments, or as you get older, or something changes, you might come down on the dose or even off potentially. But there's a general understanding that something's not working in your body and we replace the hormone and then things go on. There's so much weight bias and
yeah,
self-internalized stigma and out in the healthcare world, the healthcare system and in the world, people think that you should be able to figure this out. And so it really is the same concept. Your hormones are no longer responding. We give you a hormone, it works. You'll likely need to stay on that hormone. There are a few scenarios, and some of them might apply to the population that's here today, which is sometimes weight comes on very fast through either a medication a doctor gives you, like an SSRI for depression or anxiety, or you might be being treated for breast cancer, post breast cancer treatment with tamoxifen, or there was just something that occurred in your life where weight came on very fast. And sometimes in those scenarios, if weight has not been the excessive weight has not been the norm for 10 plus years and just
right.
for a short period of time, if we help you take off that weight, sometimes your body can figure out how to get back there again. And so it's definitely not 100% of people who need to stay on the med, but it is probably approaching about 95% when we look at long-term population studies. I find that the majority of people I to come to me, I make sure that they know that there's a chance you have to stay on this med. And even if they say, I really want to come off, I really want to come off, I said, listen, if you're going to start this, you have to know that there's a chance you might not be able to. Most of those people, 99.9% in the end, are like, I know I told you I wanted to come
Yeah,
off, but
yeah,
please, are you going to make me
yeah,
now? You're
yeah.
like,
Can
no,
I
no,
stay
it's
on?
fine.
Yeah, I love that. I love it. So helpful and so important to hear. Um, Another question. I lost over 60 pounds with Zepbound.
Wow.
Hair loss and plateauing have been my issue. I already knew I'd lose hair as I did after giving birth. Is there anything I can do for that particular one?
So for hair loss, it is the same phenomena that happens after giving birth, telogen effluvium, where your body doesn't shed hair at the beginning, and then it sheds it all at once.
Right,
And then we get into the compounded area of midlife hair loss. So sometimes, in the pregnancy scenarios, generally hair will grow back postpartum. It might be changed a little bit, but it'll grow back. Now, sometimes I have found that in kind of like the perfect storm of menopause, hair loss, and thinning too. That can be genetic and also hormonal. Sometimes people do need a little extra support with things like minoxidil, either topical or oral, to help regrow hair and to maintain it. Um, Generally, the tincture of thyme will your hair will just regrow. Taking a good multivitamin can help with that. There are some micronutrient deficiencies that can happen if you're not eating a full, well-balanced diet.
does some of this you answered. Someone asks about inflammation specifically and says, I hear it referenced all the time, but I don't really understand what it is, what it causes, and what it leads to. Could you elaborate a bit more on that?
Oh, wait, ask me that one more time. I got distracted by reading a question about sleep apnea that I really want to
Yeah,
answer.
okay.
Sorry.
Okay,
Say,
that's
talk to
okay.
me that again.
This question is about inflammation, that
Mhm.
this person hears it referenced all the time, but doesn't really understand what it is
Yeah.
specifically, what it causes, and what it can lead to.
Okay, so that's a great question. So actually, science is probably as confused as you are. Um, we know that GLP-1s act on inflammatory cascades. And so we do actually see a reduction in inflammatory markers in the body. And anecdotally, as of right now, we see improvement in autoimmune disorders that are directly related to inflammatory profiles. So the reason I say anecdotally is that I think we have a widespread understanding at this point of people who are prescribing these medications that you will see improvement, but we haven't been able to validate that in large scale just yet. And so we're not technically using it for just anti-inflammation. I think people will tell you that their joints feel better, like their gut feels smaller, even if there's not significant weight loss. That's probably the first thing people will tell me at the beginning. They're like, huh, I've really only lost like 3 pounds this month, but I just feel so much less inflamed. And for a while I was like, okay,
Yeah.
I don't know what that means, but sure. But enough people have said it and really reported it that there must be something there. We're just a little early in the science of
Okay.
understanding. Now, the other end of that is blood sugar. Blood sugar, even at a small level of inflammation, elevation, leads to inflammation all over. And the majority of chronic diseases we haven't have in this world, heart disease, dementia, cancer, are related to excess inflammation. And generally, it comes from elevated blood sugar. So, the long term benefits of anti inflammatory properties, we do have validated that and seen that.
Okay, thank you. Can you explain the difference between the semaglutide and the tirzepatide?
Mhm.
Since GLP-1 slow gastric emptying, how does a person taking them reach their protein goals? I love this question.
Yes. So, semaglutide is just one hormone, and then tirzepatide is two hormones. They're very similar, and they have the base. The reason that tirzepatide is probably is more effective for most is because the two hormones allow a better ratio for side effect profiles and allows the drug to go up much higher. We have more drugs in the pipeline. We're actually going to have a triple agonist
Yeah.
soon.
Someone asked about
So
cancer drugs. Yeah.
So there we have more that are coming, and that's where I was saying that probably we'll be able to understand your specific needs. Like we're probably going to see about the same weight loss max on these drugs as of right now what we have in the pipeline. But I think people are going to have different indications. Like your brain might work a little differently on this one. This will be good for your kidneys or for your liver. Um,
Interesting.
yes, and then protein. Okay, so this is why the recipe chapter in my book is called high protein meals to eat when you don't feel like eating. Because, yeah, you might not have a large appetite. But what I ask people to do is aim for between 20 and 40 grams of protein in every meal and to have 3 meals a day. And so you can actually get that in pretty small quantities, but you have to know where to turn for that. So, um, over on Instagram, I have a free protein downloadable that's just a visual because I actually think that's so much more helpful for people
Yeah.
to understand of what 20 grams of eggs looks like. It's actually 3 whole eggs, which people are surprised by because that's only 20 grams. Whey protein powder can pack a big punch, and that's why protein powders have become so popular because you're at least able, even if you have no desire to eat whatsoever, you can get 25 to 30 grams of protein in a small volume. Um, Same thing. So chicken and meats and animal proteins definitely carry more bang for your buck, but you can get high amounts of protein through dairy, and there are vegetarian options. So a tofu, seitan, the legumes. We can get volume. You just need to tend to need like a little bit more to achieve the protein goals. This is why it's really important to eat your protein first because you're like, I can't eat
I
that big
can't do
kale
it. Yeah.
salad with tofu and chicken in it. Okay, so leave the kale to the side for now. I'm always joking. I'm the doctor who says don't eat your
I know.
vegetables. But I mean, just at the beginning.
Right. No, I know that made me laugh in your book. I really noticed it. Like, relax with the veggies because you actually may not be able to get them in, but the protein, as best you can, should be non-negotiable. You also recommend, and I want to say out loud to people, it's really saved me, is bone broth. Has
Yes.
been like, phew, okay, this I
So much.
Yeah.
protein.
Yeah.
It's so good for you. And you can make it. Oh, you know what? I didn't put this in the book, but it's my best hack. So I
Okay.
have 4 kids, and the baby food making of like how to save food and high protein foods too is
Yeah.
so helpful because when you don't feel like eating, you don't feel like cooking.
Yeah.
So who wants to like whip up a fresh batch of bone broth? But if you make a big pot and put it into ice cube trays and then pop it out and put it in a Ziploc bag, and then every time you're like, I should eat something that I don't feel like eating, you go grab 5 ice
I
cubes,
love
put it in a
that.
mug, put it in the microwave.
That's a great hack.
I know.
Thank you for that. I
I
forgot
love that one.
because it's
And you could do
fantastic.
it with like your chilies and your like high protein soups too. They freeze so well. And you just pop them out and then defrost them instead of like in big. I think sometimes people get really overwhelmed with the idea of batch cooking, but it's
Yes.
so helpful. But also, Trader Joe's has fantastic, affordable bone broth in the refrigerator section. Two
Cool.
cups, you
Thank
can get to
you.
20 grams.
Amazing. Thank you. Important question. If someone has a liver issue, autoimmune hepatitis, for example, are
Mhm.
GLP-1s dangerous?
So you definitely should be talking to your doctor about this and all of your specialists. So this is where we need a multidisciplinary approach, but generally they're very safe and they might actually be helpful.
Great. Thank
So
you.
GLP-1s are neither metabolized through the kidneys or the liver, which makes them interesting and very safe.
Awesome. Thank you. When estrogen goes away, the fat is deposited at the waist. Should
Yes.
women start with HRT or GLP-1? For me, my waist came back with HRT.
So I think you need to treat the individual's things, and HRT won't necessarily lead to weight loss, and
Right.
GLP-1 won't necessarily lead to improvement in menopausal symptoms. There's like a lot of hope in the online world that are, and people will anecdotally say, "Oh, my night sweats got better." Well, if you lose weight, your upregulation of their fat cells can help with some of the thermoregulation, but honestly, treat what you're treating separately and then in combination, they can be very effective too.
Thank you. Someone asked if I can talk about my experience on a GLP-1. I would love to. I won't do it here. I will do it on my Instagram feed. I'm happy to do that and talk about it. I love talking about it. It's changed my life. So look for that soon. I have heard that GLP-1s lower hormones. So do postmenopausal women need to adjust their dose of HRT? I think this probably speaks again to what you just said, which is it's the individual, and certainly speak to your physician if you are an alloy customer
Yes. So I
patient.
think people might, so because there's delayed gastric emptying, if you're taking anything orally, sometimes you might need to adjust medications.
Right.
You might need to adjust medications you're on as you lose weight. So blood pressure medications are a big one. As you lose weight, your body might not need as high of a dose of blood pressure med. Same thing with a thyroid medication. And it might be the same for a hormone that you're taking too. But generally speaking, these medications don't lower hormones.
Oh, okay. Someone asks about an oral GLP-1. Do they exist?
They do. So right now on market, we have Ribelsis. Ribelsis is not approved for weight loss, and we don't really use it for weight loss because it's hard to tolerate and not that effective for weight loss.
Okay.
So I know that there are some compounding pharmacies offering it. It is definitely not my preferred.
Right.
But do have some newer oral drugs in the pipeline that appear to be even more effective. So
I
stay
can't
tuned.
imagine how much is in the pipeline. Yeah.
So much.
So much. Someone asks, can you speak more to leptin or
Mhm.
about leptin?
So I saw that one and I kind of came back here when we were talking about ultra processed food.
Yeah.
So leptin resistance is definitely brain neurohormonal dysregulation, where your brain is like, oh, I'm supposed to be full, but I'm not. And with more fat cells, we're actually supposed to improve. Like leptin should be more effective because you're like, oh, I've gained weight. I shouldn't be hungry and I should be satiated, but actually it's counterproductive to that. And as we gain weight, leptin resistance kicks in. And so we just lose track of what full and hunger is in fat. Everyone thinks fat's a nuisance. Fat is so metabolically active,
You
and
talk about it in your book as an organ in and
it
of
is.
itself, which is fascinating and so sort of helpful to understand
Yeah.
how it's operating or becoming dysfunctional.
Yeah, it's an organ. It has a huge influence on our other organs and the hormones that are at play. It once fat comes on, fat wants to stay on. One of my favorite little cartoons is these little fat cells that are like, we got lost for a second, but like, tell us how to get
Thank
back,
you.
you know? Um, and it really, and that's because fat has the cells have a memory and it feels like it's doing its job. We were primed and ready to be people who needed to hold on to any little fat that was extra on their body. We weren't born as humans to live in a world where we had hyper palatable foods and we're expected to sit at computers and we were no longer forced, in the forest and in the
Right.
fields. And that's great for us as a society, I think, but it doesn't, our body hasn't figured out that it should be able to let go and keep off. And fat is it's just super active. And so I
Right.
think it helps people to understand it like that. Hey, this is just something, it's not a willpower issue. This is an organ in my body who, just like when my heart has high blood pressure, my kidneys don't filter as well, or I, have a nodule growing somewhere. It's just we have to take care of it and treat it like it's not just a you problem. It's just the body.
So helpful. Thank you. Guys, I just want to let you know also that Dr. Sowa can stay with us a little bit past 1. So I am going to take full advantage of that and get through some more questions. But I do want to sort of, in another 10 minutes, get back to something I think is really important that I don't want to leave on the cutting room floor, as it were. Somebody asks about how about a touch of metformin versus the GLP-1 if they only have a little weight to lose?
I love metformin. I talk about it in the book. Metformin is not technically a weight loss drug, but people can lose up to 6% of their total body weight on it, even in the absence of type 2 diabetes, which is actually what it's approved for. It can be very, very helpful if there's slight insulin resistance, but it is not the powerhouse that a GLP-1 medication is, but it's a really good place to start.
Okay, great. Somebody comments that they want to know about strength training and muscle
Mhm.
mass and protein and things that aren't medication related. I just want to encourage that person again to get your book. You talk about really like the whole approach to weight loss, beyond and in addition to GLP-1
Mhm.
medications. We're actually speaking to a colleague of yours at the end of the month, Holly Rillinger,
Oh, yeah.
who you've
Yes.
developed a program with on strength training and so on. But can you speak just sort of broad strokes to that?
So exercise is very important, but I have to say that I probably am actually a little bit gentler about exercise than a lot of what you see online. So the gym has betrayed many of us. So it was sold to us as a way to lose weight, and most people didn't lose weight there because you actually don't really lose weight through exercise. Exercise is very important cardiovascularly for your bone health and for your muscles, and we'll talk about what kind of exercise in a second. Exercise is also really, really important for weight maintenance. So once you lose weight, or it's an important thing to help us stay, but it's really ineffective at helping us lose weight. And so I often have to rewire people's relationship with the gym. And I also really look to people trusting it again. And sometimes people are like, but I've lost weight now. Why would I ever want to go back? And
Right.
it's really important to go back for all of the things I just said, and in particular, strength training. So I give people a little more grace, I think, in timeline than some people do. At the beginning, if you try to overhaul your diet and start a new medication and watch out for how the side effects and work on your mind, that's something we haven't talked about today. But the third foundation in my book, it's habits, it's food, and then it's
Good.
mental.
Yeah.
That really takes some time and it takes some work. So if I ask you to throw everything at this journey from day one, we're human and you'll get overwhelmed and you'll probably give up, right? And exercise, I feel like needs a little, you need to like get to know yourself in this journey before we really ramp it up. Now, if you're someone who's exercising regularly, don't stop. Please
Right.
keep going. But if you're someone who's like, I haven't been doing this for 10 years, okay, we're gonna baby step, you're gonna move, you're gonna try to increase your daily activity, and then we are going to no more than 10% of total body weight loss and no more than 6 months, you're going to start strength training. You're going to get into the physical therapist if you're too afraid to do it with a trainer or in a class. Or you could do something like Holly's program, but lifting heavy weights. Now, not heavy to the point of injuring yourself, but doing something more than just aerobic activity is really important. We want to improve, we talked about at the beginning, but that body composition is essential. There's a lot of fear that GLP-1 medications make you lose muscle. They don't. They
Yeah.
help you lose a lot of weight. When you lose a lot of weight, you lose both muscle and fat. It's impossible to not, except there is a new drug in development that's making the body composition even better. But actually, the ratio of body muscle to fat loss is improved on tirzepatide than it is with calorie restriction alone. But you can really help yourself by getting to the gym and building muscle and focusing on protein. And I've had patients who have honestly, they've lost a lot of weight and their muscle number has stayed exactly the same, or their ratio has improved significantly, even though they've lost muscle. So that's where that really becomes important.
Great, thank you. I actually do want to get into the sort of emotional landscape with you before we close. I'm just going to take a few more questions that came from people. One I see, and I actually did a live with somebody about this very issue, which was she is saying that she's been on a compounded tirzepatide for a year and
Mhm.
have not seen yet any weight loss. Can you speak about that? I spoke to
Yeah.
someone about this very thing and it was fascinating. I'm just going to quickly say what she said to me, which was she got off compounded and went to branded, which made a big difference for her. And also, she saw benefits beyond weight loss for almost a year before she lost weight.
I know that this is a heated topic. The stance I take is that these medications are actually quite complicated to make, and the FDA has very strict protocols of what exactly is in these medications. So being branded is not just paying for a name, you are paying for quality control. And these medications are made in the proper way and they're stored in the proper way and they're tested to make sure everything that they say is going to be in them is in them. And so I have seen this too in my practice a lot. People are like, it did nothing. And compounded medications are not cheap either. Thankfully, the the medications are starting to come down in price. My hope is that in the next 12 months, we really see a big dip in
Hmm.
pricing, even if outside of insurance.
Interesting. And I would also say, because I've seen several questions specific to alloy, please do go on our website and connect with an alloy physician and ask some questions that you are asking here of them. They can answer those questions for you. Um, let's see.
Oh, can I set sleep apnea? I've seen a
Yes,
couple
I
questions come in
didn't see
about
that
sleep
one. Go
apnea.
ahead, please.
So this has probably been one of the things that I've changed most significantly in my practice in the past 6 months. So Zepbound now carries an indication for sleep apnea, and a lot of insurances still aren't covering it, but they will. So these drug makers have been smart to start to go after indications beyond just weight management because again, we have such bias. It's going to take a little bit of
Yeah,
time for government and insurance to move the needle on just on covering just for obesity or weight.
right.
And but we do know that with weight loss comes an improvement in all these whole host of diseases, and one of them is sleep apnea. So it's the type of sleep apnea that's not central, but is related to excess weight or the back of your, like how your back of your throat is structured. And sleep apnea is when you're sleeping and then you are snoring a lot, you feel like you're gasping for air. Maybe you don't even notice at all, but just super tired the next day. And it's because you're having interruptions in your sleep and oxygenation. And over time, they can create big health complications. Also, it can make it really easy to gain weight and hard to lose weight. So at the beginning of helping people to lose weight, I would always screen for this. And if I felt like it was really impeding their life, we'd get them set up, get them sleep tested, get them CPAP. But often the solve for sleep apnea is weight loss. So I would say, hey, if we can't lose weight in the way that I think we can lose weight, then we'll really go toward this. Now I'm getting everybody tested because I want them to know if they have it or not at the beginning so that even if their insurance doesn't cover it now, it might cover it in the future. And we have a documented test saying sleep apnea. Someone said my BMI is only 27 and I have mild sleep apnea. Will tirzepatide help? It really depends on the type of apnea you have. So you have to go back and look at that report of what the sleep apnea doctor is saying. And if it's obstructive sleep apnea, OSA, then yes, you can still see improvement even at lower BMIs. And so, in my opinion, it is definitely worth it to treat it for sleep apnea alone.
Terrific. Thank you. I want to now pivot in our last minutes to what you just mentioned, sort of that third
Oh,
portion
yeah.
of addressing weight loss and the utilization of a GLP-1. I often talk about sort of arguably, I feel like the psychological factors around perimenopause may be louder or more impactful in many ways than the physical. This isn't true for everyone. It's just, I think as we've been in this midlife conversation for quite a few years now, we often hear, certainly was true in my case, that anxiety was like the first symptom, and there was no sort of line between that and perimenopause. Now there is a faster drawn line. There is often for many people around weight, as we talked about before, there's triggers, there's sort of fear of eating, there's fear of not eating, there's panic around shifting from a dependency to food for pleasure to something else. You offer what some of these switches might be, sort of looking for pleasure. But I guess really, can you speak about this part of
Mhm.
your book and your practice?
Well, I think we first need to acknowledge that weight, carrying excess weight generally carries a history of a lot of trauma. So
Yeah.
it might not be right in your face, but it's your doctor going into the doctor and complaining of a sore throat and them saying, "Have you thought about weight loss?"
Yeah. Yeah.
Or your family member saying, "Oh, you gained a little bit of weight. Look at that freshman 15," right? Or a friend not inviting you to be part, a bridesmaid in the wedding. Like it goes back and it's so quiet and sometimes so loud. And I think as we lose weight, so much of that trauma is resurfaced. And it's really important that we start to leave space to acknowledge that. One of the things that I find is that negative thinking, I talked about it a little bit, like the 10-pound panic and the sabotaging thoughts. Negative thoughts can take this from a wonderful thing to a terrible thing. And your brain can be your worst enemy. So the medication will be doing the job, you'll be eating the right things, you'll be going to the gym, and it's your brain constantly telling you that this isn't enough, that we need to move the goalpost, that this will never work, that this is just like every other failed attempt. And I teach cognitive behavioral therapy framework, and I put it in the book. It is by no means an exhaustive guide of working with a therapist, which often patients need to do, especially toward the end of their weight loss, because weight loss does not fix you and your big problems. It's a beautiful thing. It doesn't really change who you are, and it might
Right.
enhance parts of your life, but it can also make parts of your life hurt a little bit more. And
Right.
so leaving space to catch the negative thinking is very, very important. And then we can learn how to rewire it. And knowing that you are not totally unique in this and that this is so common in the weight loss journey is so powerful. And I just think this is the part that nobody is talking
Yeah.
about. So then what happens when you take away your food and your alcohol as your sole source of pleasure? And that's a little extreme because most people have many other elements, but they've constructed a whole life around drinking and eating. And it's not even to a point of a problem, but it's just what they do on a Saturday night. It's how they unwind. Well, we have to start turning back to,
Right.
other habits. And again, people will think that because they're feeling it, they're the only ones, and that will ruin their whole journey. And no, we just have to take a breath, find how, make a plan, and to reroute how we're going to think about it. And cognitive behavioral therapy really, really helps us in this journey.
Thank you, Dr. Sowa, for that. And as I was listening to you, I was thinking that we talk a lot about perimenopause being an opportunity to dial into your health in a new way. And I feel like this is also that, this approach, sort of understanding or approaching the adoption of a GLP-1 into your lifestyle is also opportunity. Dr. Sowa, I'm about to close with you, but I just see two more really important questions.
Yeah.
Can I ask? One says, this might sound bizarre, but does a GLP-1 reduce bone size? So many people I know who are on it look completely different. Their entire frames are smaller. Why?
Yeah, I saw that.
Uh,
No, it doesn't reduce bone size. And in fact, actually, healthy weight loss on a GLP-1 can improve bone strength. So there's fear of that, like my bones will thin. No, it's just that
it's just
it's
smaller.
it's the muscles, it's fat. It's just it all slims.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it all slims. Someone asked, your protein guide can be found on your Instagram
Yes. Alexandra Sowa, MD. Find me over there. So it was just like a
handle.
recent post I did.
Yeah. Somebody says that she had high blood pressure when she gained weight. It was concerningly high. She's completely off meds now after losing 50 pounds. A few questions about vegetarian sources of protein. You spoke about that.
Yes. I mean, you can definitely hit your, I saw that when I was like,
Yeah.
yes, you can be a vegetarian. If you know what you're doing as a vegetarian, you just have
Yeah.
to seek out the protein sources and it can be so healthy and easily done.
And finally, glucocorticoids. Am I saying that right? And a
Mhm.
GLP-1, your opinion.
So I think this question means if you're on a steroid for chronic disease, which is
Okay.
often the disease management, especially in the autoimmune worlds, do GLP-1 medications offset that? Yes. So also a lower carbohydrate diet has been proven to be very effective at offsetting the weight gain that can come from being on chronic steroid use.
Dr. Alexandra Sowa, I'm just such a fan.
Oh, you're
When
so
I'm in the
cute.
city one of these days, I really want to come see you in person. This has been such a thoughtful, enormously helpful conversation.
Thank you.
Please do, everyone. I don't typically do this, but it really is such a wonderful book. Please
Thank
do
you.
get it, grab it if you haven't yet. Drop into Alloy Women's Health if you want to speak to a menopause practitioner who can guide you on all things menopause, perimenopause, weight, and so on. Reach out to Dr. Sowa if she is somebody you want to connect with. I do.
I
Um,
try my best to respond on Instagram.
you
I'm not too
you're
popular, so
you're
it's like I can still do it. So come over there and ask me some
you're
questions.
phenomenal. And it's not just your conversations about, weight and GLP-1s, it's your conversations about medicine in general, which I just so appreciate. So thank you to everyone who joined us today. This should be up on our YouTube channel, Alloy Women's Health, in 24 to 48 hours. Dr. Alexandra Sowa, an absolute pleasure. Thank you so, so very much. Love speaking with you and learning from
Thank
you.
you.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.